Cinderella and Prince Charming, Sir Lancelot and Guinevere. We expect our romantic relationships to last forever, and our happily ever after fairy tales perpetuate the myth that love relationships should be both easy and perfect. Yet, even in fairy tales, the main characters encounter incredible challenges that test their resilience, commitment, and fortitude. Could it be that our romantic relationships are one of life's greatest proving grounds for our ability to love fully and deeply, despite our imperfections and life's natural stressors? Today, we'll focus on this listener's real life question. How can you keep a long-term relationship going despite external stressors? What are your suggestions for navigating issues that put a lot of strain on a relationship, such as addiction, death of a loved one, health problems, or serious financial concerns? And with that question as the focus of today's episode, I'm Dr. Carla Marie Manley, and this is Imperfect Love.
Welcome to Imperfect Love with Dr. Carla Marie Manley, psychologist, author, and relationship expert. I'm here to help unravel mysteries and misconceptions about love, relationships, and mental health issues, plus everything in between. Love is complicated, people are not perfect, and relationships surely can be tough. Together, we'll navigate this messy, imperfect space of real life.
Today, I'm joined by a very special guest, Myrna Haskell, who will be sharing her expertise on relationship issues. With a vast background as a feature writer, columnist, editor, speaker, and founder of Sanctuary, an online women's magazine focusing on the arts, philanthropy, health and wellness, culture, and community, Myrna is an amazing individual. So, welcome to the podcast, Myrna. It's such a joy to be with you.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for inviting me to be on here with you, Carla. I just love this new podcast you're doing. I mean, the topics are going to be fabulous. I just know it. So, and I'm excited to talk about this one today with you. So thank you so much for inviting me.
So you're welcome. And before we jump into today's episode, could you tell our listeners just a little bit about what makes you you?
What makes me me? I think, I think for those who know about the magazine, a lot of me is in there. I love to be involved in the community. I'm a very social person. I love to talk and communicate and write. So that all goes hand in hand, right? And I love to tell the stories of women who are making a difference, in some inspirational way. And so really, my passion for life kind of comes through Sanctuary Magazine a bit, I guess. I'm a chatter, which is why I love being on here with you. So I guess that's all I want to say, unless you have another question, I guess, about me in particular. But I do enjoy communication. That's a big part of what I've done, not just in my career, but I have lots of friends. I love to go out and socialize. It's communication and social events are a big part of my life.
And thank you for that beautiful background. And I do have to say, a big piece of what makes me such a fan of you and Sanctuary Magazine is the fact that you really channel so much energy into empowering women, supporting women, and not that it's actually just women that you reach. There are people, all genders absorb that positivity. All of us can really embrace that joy that comes through your work and any act of kindness we can do to support other people. So thank you for the work that you do.
Oh, thank you, Carla. You as well.
Thank you. So let's move into the question of the day, which
Mhm.
really takes us to the roots of long-term relationships and how we might get into a relationship thinking, oh, this is going to be easy. This is going to be wonderful. I have visions of a house with a white picket fence, and I'm going to live happily ever after with my partner, and we're going to have a child or a dog or whatever. And then life gets in the way. And
Yes.
there are so many things that can come up in long-term relationships, whether it's an aging parent, the loss of a child, an addiction of a family member, a huge world event like 9/11 that shatters somebody's life, a natural disaster, fire, flood, hurricane, tornado, where your lovely life, if it was, a really easygoing relationship, it can be super challenged. And if your relationship was already a bit tested, already a bit tumultuous, well, those life stressors can actually break the relationship.
Right. Right.
So you're married, you're in a long-term
Yes.
relationship. So tell us a little bit about what you've found to be your best coping strategies for dealing with life stressors.
Well, I will be married 32 years this year. I've been with my husband for 34, so I think that qualifies me in terms of, personal experience to talk about this topic. Um,
Certainly.
Now, that whole first love thing that goes on, there needs to be something more behind that from the beginning. So when you search for a life partner, hopefully going in, you know that you have the same values. You have the same ideas of family. And if you're going to raise a family together, right? And you communicate and talk about these things before day one in the wedding, right? Because at least if you can start, I think, from a base of, the two of you have the same idea about how you think at that point in your life, how you're going to move through things, and how you're going to use your values and your goals to move in a certain direction together, that's helpful. But what I think happens is, even without the disasters, people change, right? And is there a strong background there, a strong communication base, that when the other partner does start to change, that you can work through those changes because there's so much love behind it and so much agreement in every way about how you want to move through life. So I think lots of times people sort of, it's that fairy tale. I think I heard you say that idea of, the wedding and Cinderella and, having a person that's going to be there for you through thick and thin. And you don't really understand what that truly means until things start to go wrong. It's easy to love when everything's beautiful and everything is fun and there's no money issues and, you don't have a child who's sick and, you don't have someone hasn't died, and you're going through that together and maybe handling that differently. Yeah, without that really, really, I think, strong base where you know that you're going to be able to move through life together when these external pitfalls happen, things are going to unravel, I think.
Thank you so much. And I agree with you. So we're talking about first setting up the relationship, and we can get to those issues that come if you haven't set up the relationship well. We can talk about that. And through no fault of our own, sometimes we don't create that healthy foundation. And I agree with you going into a relationship. And so this is for our listeners who are looking at relationships or in new relationships. And I talk about this in both my book, Date Smart and the Joy of Imperfect Love, of how important it is to interview yourself and the potential partner to see,
Mhm.
wait a minute,
Some people don't talk about the big things before they get married.
yes, and we
You have to communicate. So for me, number one, Carla, communication. You have to be able to communicate about the good things and the bad things and how you're going to move through them together to help each other be stronger to get through that bad thing that happened, right? Rather than fighting each other on it. So
absolutely.
that's hard to do, right?
Well, let's bracket
Sometimes it's
these.
hard to do.
Absolutely. And let's bracket communication for a moment and we'll make it our own subtopic in this
Okay.
podcast because it's such a critical piece. So let's go back to the part of setting up the relationship and having someone you're dating, maybe you're, moving in together wherever you are, and slowing down to say to yourself, what do I want in a relationship? What do I have to offer? What are my values? And what are my priorities? So if each partner knows all of those important things, then they can communicate it to the other. But we sometimes miss that step because we think, I want a partner. I want someone who's cute, makes a lot of money, who's artsy, whatever our criteria are. And then we launch into the dating world and scoop up someone without realizing, wait a minute, we might not have a friendship here. We might not have we might have the superficial elements. So, what do you think about that idea of first diving in to do a self-assessment on what you have to offer and what you really want?
I think I want to talk about first that relationships, and it went down the wrong pipe, two-way street, right? So in order to get, you need to give. And a relationship is all about giving and getting, right? And sometimes your partner is only functioning at 30%. They're depressed about a loss of a job or whatever that is, and you have to give the 70% then, right? But then the tables might turn at another time. You're at 30%, they're going to give 70%. So I think that that's a big part of when you start out. You have to see that you're giving, but you're also receiving from this partner, because that's going to happen throughout your relationship for decades, the giving and receiving. And you need to do both. And both partners need to be on board with that, I think, because if you're not going to support each other when you're down, the relationship's going to unravel, right? So I
Absolutely.
think that's something you can think about when you're dating somebody before you get into a lifelong commitment. How has that been working? The push and the pull, the give and the get, the two-way street. How has that been working so far in the relationship? Has something happened when I've been upset about something and my partner was there for me right away, wanted to talk about it with me, wanted to discuss it, seemed concerned that I was upset rather than just blowing it off, or you're making too much of this, just little things like that. I think if you pay attention to those things, and they're going well early on, I think they'll probably continue to go well into the relationship. If there's those small red flags early on, those red flags are going to get worse as you continue into the relationship, right?
Absolutely. So if we look at how we're setting this up for a healthy relationship, we interview ourselves about what we have to give, what we want. We are really clear in that so that when we're dating, we can state that and have the other person come back to us with what their needs are, their values, their priorities, make
Yes.
sure there's a good enough match. Then we move to the place where, as part of that, actually, we can talk to someone and say, hey, I believe, and by the way, research shows this to be true. Relationships that are balanced are among the most successful over time. So your idea, yeah, there are times it'll be 30 where I'm able to give 30 because I'm, carrying two jobs and the other person might need to carry seven, but 70%, but we want to flip that so that I am then able to carry maybe 70% at another time while the other person might be in the hospital, or that person's carrying two jobs, or whatever it is. So it's over time, do we have that 50-50? So to be able to talk about that as we're dating, as we're in long-term relationships, exactly what you said, Myrna, creating that balance. It won't always be each person. I hear this sometimes, each person should give 100%. We can strive to give 100%, But if we're sick with the flu or something, we're just not going to be able to. So we don't want to act like we're sick with the flu or entitled for the entire relationship, but we want to give ourselves the grace to have some self-care, and the other partner will step up. And then when that partner needs the balance shifts. So I love that you brought that up, because that ongoing balance, which takes communication and mindfulness, does help us when those big stressors come. It helps us have a nice soft atmosphere in the short term and long term. So when those stressors come, we're used to a teamwork approach.
Yeah,
We're
I was going to
used
say
to,
team too, right? You really are a team. You need to be a team. You
yeah.
need to be a team to move through the difficult parts of life. That's what finding a partner is. Some people choose not to, right? Some people are fine just being independent and not getting into a long-term relationship. We've seen that many times, right? And that's fine. And you can be happy with just friends. But when you go into a long-term commitment with a partner, it's a team now, right? So you have to help your teammate out. Your teammate sometimes has to help you out. I'm so glad you said team, because I kind of think of my husband and I actually as being a really good team. We actually, he lifts me when I'm down and vice versa. And we do that really well, I think, and we communicate well. I think probably we've lasted this long because of those two things the most. We work well as a team and we talk. If I'm upset, I talk to him, he listens, and vice versa. So, yeah, you know, I mean, you're not always the one that's going to throw and make the basket, right? You're going to pass to the other person so that they can have some success and that they can have some attention. I love the whole team idea. I'm so glad you brought that up.
It's interesting that we're on this pathway, because it is throughout the joy of imperfect love. I talk about how teamwork, we're used to it in the work setting. We get it,
Yes,
we need to be team players. Yet we often forget that that same principle is even more important in the home relationship. It's not about one partner being the boss and the other person saying, yes, sir, yes, ma'am, whatever it is. No, it is about saying, we are team. This is team energy. We want to be on the same page. And we go back to the piece about communication. The way to stay a team member is to communicate, not to yell, not to go silent, not to, talk over each other, not to compartmentalize, but to consistently come, get through those hard conversations, get through the easy conversations, and make communicating, communing with each other in the truest sense of the word. Make it part of the fabric of the relationship, even if you came from a background where communicating wasn't safe. It is about, and that's part of that screening process that we want to be doing early
yeah,
on and
yeah.
carry it through, is saying, wait a second, I value communication, because communication allows me to be emotionally connected. It allows my partner to be on the same page. It allows us to get through these little hiccups in life. Like I said, we'll have dinner. I invited you to the restaurant at 7 o'clock, but you showed up at 8, and the person's saying, oh, I wasn't clear on it. So when we look and say, wait a second, if we start working on communication, these little hiccups in life build the foundation for when those big hiccups come, and they do come. They
They
do.
do come. And the
Sometimes.
team thing too, Carla, I think comes in particular good use if you're parents, because I've seen so many times parents working against each other instead of presenting themselves as a team to their children. We're working together to help you through this as a teenager or whatever it is. If children see that their parents aren't a team, they'll try to use one parent against another parent, right, to get their way. So I think the team, I'm still on the team thing, but when you're raising children, you also need to be a team raising your kids.
Absolutely. That's one thing I remember about my parents very strongly. You couldn't get to the other person because they both were saying, wait till your father comes home, wait till I
Yeah.
get a chance to talk to your mom, wait. And no matter how hard I tried to get one of them on my side, they were a united
Together
front.
on things.
They were
Yeah.
going to. And for families that aren't together, where, maybe the parents have separated or, the partners are living in two different states or cities or across town, it's so important
Yes, it's still
to
important, right?
stay on the same
Absolutely.
page because kids' relationships thrive on consistency.
Yes,
We
absolutely.
and we all do our best when we know the agreements, when we're held accountable to the agreements. And that's a big piece about the listener's question about how do we navigate these hardships? Well, if the hardships bring in all of the arbitrary, all of the unexpected, but if we have good communication principles as a foundation and we've been using them consistently, then we're able to say to a partner, God, I'm really suffering right now. I'm not feeling well, or I'm grieving. I need some extra space. I need some support. And the other partner may be in a place where, if it's, say, you've lost a child, where they're saying, I'm grieving too. I don't have anything else to give to you. I'm in such pain myself. Well, then what do we do? Then as a team, we can say, maybe we both need support. Maybe we need a grief group. Maybe we need marriage therapy. Maybe we need relationship counseling, whatever it is. And how do we get there? Through communication. So we're now really heavy into that piece you brought up that we're weaving throughout the episode.
Yes. And I
The
heard you mention like losing a child. I interviewed the co-founder of Taylor's Gift Foundation late last year as one of our features in the magazine. And this was part of the discussion that, grief over the loss of a child is something that can break up a marriage because
Mhm.
people grieve differently. And her analogy kind of was like you're on the same roller coaster, but different tracks. And that you need to find space where you can give each other grace for how you're dealing with the tragedy differently. Because if you're dealing with it differently, that can kind of move you away from each other, right? But at the same time, if you give that person grace and you understand that it's okay, they're grieving differently, you're supporting each other even though you're dealing with the tragedy differently. So I thought that was kind of interesting, how, because she lost her 13-year-old daughter to a terrible ski accident. And so when something rocks your world that badly and something is that tragic to lose a child, that would be an instance, right, of something that can completely unravel the fabric of what you had when your family was happy and everyone was together, right? So I wonder if, that idea of, change too, right? Over the decades, we change. That works the same way too, I think. I'm not the person exactly that my husband married almost 32 years ago, and he's not exactly the same guy either, right? But we work through that together. We make that more of a joy that we still love each other and that we have all this history together and that we've gone through changes together, so
Absolutely. And
because those kinds of things, Carla, the death of a child, I think you mentioned, people lose their homes and everything they have and hurricanes and like these really strong external pressures really test a marriage, any long-term partnership or love relationship. That's when it's tested the most, right? And without those foundations and those graces that you give one another, things are going to unravel.
absolutely. And going back to the grief piece where you were talking about grace, and I love the concept of grace and love that the woman you interviewed said, have grace for your partner. But I also really want to emphasize the key of giving yourself grace.
Yes.
We're so used to in some situations saying, have grace for others, have grace for others. Yet when I work with clients, I'm always saying, and sometimes they're surprised because they're expecting me to say, have grace for, your mother-in-law, or have grace. No, have grace for yourself. Have grace for yourself and compassion for yourself, that sometimes you will be floundering. You will, when life struggles come and you're looking at bills that you can't pay, or a child has an addiction, or a partner's addiction has been uncovered, or something like that. You're saying, what do I do? How can I bear this? So when these, or you get a mental health diagnosis or a physical health diagnosis within your family system, where you're saying, and sometimes it's one after another. I know people
Yeah.
who have encountered hardship after hardship after hardship. And that's where having that team energy, and also the grace for each other, that we can get through this if we're a team, if we give each other grace, give ourselves grace for being imperfect, for being human, for maybe melting down at times, sobbing on the couch, all of the things that are a natural part of facing life's challenges, making space for ourselves and each other. And I think that's an important part of teamwork.
Yes, yes. And I love that you said give yourself grace.
Mm.
I found with all the women that I've interviewed, one of the things that comes up over and over again is that women are natural caregivers. And because they've always been the caregiver, taking care of everybody else, elderly parents, children, their partner, their colleagues when a colleague is down, this idea that take care of everybody else first drains you. And if you can't, as you said, charge yourself, give yourself grace, how are you really going to take care of everybody else? Because eventually you're going to be depleted, right?
Absolutely. And
You will be depleted of energy, of, just feeling healthy, feeling good about yourself. You can't take care of other people unless you think about yourself and care for yourself, right? So
yes,
that's
and that,
something that comes up over and over again. I feel like that's hard for a lot of people, you know?
yes. And some people think that it's selfish to engage in self-care because they've been socialized to believe that self-care or grace for the self, which are two different things, that those are wrong if you're a nurturer, wrong if you're a woman. But in truth, it's such an important part of showing yourself that you matter, giving yourself grace, giving yourself compassion, showing your partner, if your partner's not really giving you, the space and the care you deserve, to be able to say, hey, I'm modeling this. And
Yes,
also, if there are children in the home, neighbors, friends who are able to see someone saying, I am not in a good space right now to host a party, or to bring
right.
cookies, or to be the giver or the doer. I'm going through a lot and I need to turn inward for a little while. Or you might be saying quite the opposite. I need to come outward a little bit more than normal. So really, I think that's such an important piece of handling these challenges that life will bring our way. And I also, going back to some of the pieces you were talking about, with when you have relationship issues and the relationship is struggling and communication might be difficult. I believe that if you're not good at communicating with a partner, maybe it was never modeled for you, that going back to the basics of mirroring, reflective listening, and really working with a partner just to listen to them, hear what they have to say, practice not interrupting, repeating, mirroring back, right, what they said, and then giving the partner the opportunity to do the same. Because mirroring, reflective listening, isn't about fixing, it isn't about opinions, it is about giving the partner the the ability to say their piece without interjecting our opinion, reflecting it back. This is what I heard you say. And then once that process is done, giving the partner the space to do the same. What do you think about mirroring, AKA reflective listening?
I hadn't heard that term before, Carla, but I know you're just a wealth of knowledge, obviously, on all of this. I, I think that's an excellent exercise for couples to do. I'm not sure that I do that. Like, I feel like I'm a very good communicator, but during like a heated argument or you're upset about something, I think that's where the challenge is because you want to jump in there because you're upset, right? But the taking the deep breath and the being a good listener is naturally going to bring emotions down because the other person has a chance to speak their mind and say what's hurting them.
Yes.
So I guess so you repeat back, you say you listen, open your ears, listen very carefully to what they're saying, then repeat it back to make sure you didn't mishear anything that they said, right?
Mhm.
Um, that's a really good exercise. And I think it's one that would work when things are heated and you're upset. Because it's easy to, if you're a talker and you love to communicate, that's easy when everything's going well, right? It's always about now something's wrong and you're emotional. So I think practicing that during good times and then using it almost as a habitual kind of thing, I think that's great for couples to practice that. I'm
And
going to try to do that. I don't know that I feel like I'm a good listener, but I know I interject too soon. I do know I do that. So do you actually do this with couples therapy, kind of have the actual practicing of the listening, repeating back, asking questions, learning to keep your mouth shut while your partner is going through exactly how they feel about something?
absolutely. And not only do I practice it in my own life because I didn't come from a childhood where communication was taught or honored. It was children should be seen and not heard. So you were taught to be very small and no matter how old you are. So it really was when I learned about mirroring, reflective listening. And it's something that if you watch many women, they will naturally do it when a girlfriend's sharing something and the other woman will say, "Oh my God, he really did that to you? He did that? I'm so sorry. It sounds like, he was really saying horrible things." So, in a way, it's very common for some women to mirror back as a way of joining in our romantic relationships and even our friendships and business. Sometimes we're so busy speaking our piece, we're not listening to the other person. So if we were asked, what did the other person just say? We might not know because we were so into what we wanted to say.
Yeah.
And that's where the power is with reflective listening. And if we learn, it feels clunky at first. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, laborious. But the more you use it on simple topics, where there is no charge.
Right. It's the
Lies.
emotions that come into it. I think that if it's not practiced, you lose it, because now
Yes,
you're emotional about whatever it is that's going on. So
yes,
I can see that practicing this type of communication is very important.
yes. And if you start with the basics, where something as simple as, if I hear you right, you're going to bring home the dry cleaning and pick up the kids from soccer. And the other person is able to say, yeah, absolutely. I'm getting the kids and the dry cleaning, but I was also going to stop for milk. So, what it does is it becomes not only a way of helping the other person know they're heard, it helps the receiver take it in. Neurobiologically, we're putting that into our memory banks because we're repeating it back.
Repeating it, and also because you're repeating it, say the other person is upset, it's almost like you can understand it better because you're verbalizing it yourself.
Absolutely. And so
Yeah.
that type of listening, if you are upset and you're saying, this is it, and I'm doing my best not to get reactive, doing my best not to cut you off, and I'm simply listening. And the hard part with that is I'm likely upset too. I'm likely hurting too. So I have to do what I call bracketing the experience. I take my experience and I put it over here and I tell my inner child and my adult person, there will be time for this. And then I repeat back what my partner or another person said. If I hear you right, this is how you're feeling. This is what you're saying. And then the partner can come back and say, well, yeah, you got that, but you didn't get this, blah, blah, blah. And they may add something on. And then you simply say, okay, if I hear you right, this is what you're saying. And then the partner, and then you watch your partner de-escalate
Yes.
because they're feeling heard.
I can see that. Yes.
Yes. And then interestingly enough, what you sometimes find, what I've found, is by the time it's my turn, the issue's been resolved. Just by me, and that's not always the case. Sometimes I still have things that I want to say and have the other person reflect back to me. So people tend to avoid it, Myrna, because it's time consuming and it does feel clunky at first. But oh my goodness, does it help with
Yeah.
setting
I can
this
see
pace?
that. I can totally see that. That's
And
excellent.
isn't it interesting? And we think about how often we do this in business negotiations. Someone will say, the price for this, you know, carpet is $2,000. And we say, okay, I just want to make
Did you
sure.
just say
Did you,
$2,000?
did you just say $2,000? Okay, now does that include tax? And the person will
Mhm.
say, no, it's $2,000 plus tax. And I go, okay, 2,000, can you throw in delivery with that? Nope, can't throw in delivery with that. So there's that, we're mirroring. But when
Yeah,
it comes to bringing that into especially challenging times, our emotions, we become dysregulated. Our emotions, we're often in
take
fight
over.
flight mode.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so if we can remember that part, because communication, and I love that you started, talking about the communication piece because it is the highlight. It is when we have this communication, I'm able to come to my partner. You're able to go to your partner and say, this is how I'm feeling. It's hard for me to say this, but this is what I'm going through. And then the partner can come back, and sometimes you actually join over the tragedy. You join over it rather than becoming fragmented because, and I'm going to ask you this question, because you're being open and honest with each other, even when it's hard. So, what do
Yes.
you think in all of the work you've done? What do you think about the importance of being open, honest, transparent with your partner through thick and thin, through the good times and the not so good times?
I think you have to be, because if you're holding something in, right? And you're not being transparent about that to your husband, your wife, your long-term partner, it festers, right? You have to let out hurt and things that make you emotional. If you don't, men sometimes, I know it's the whole gender thing I'm getting into, but I just find that sometimes it's harder on their part to talk about how they're getting emotional about something, right? But if you hold it in, it's going to cause additional problems, right? Now you're more stressed. Now you're going to be upset about something that you probably weren't even going to be upset about because you weren't honest and you didn't let out what you were feeling about this other issue. So now you're fighting about two cartons of eggs weren't picked up, only one, when two was on the list. Something stupid, right? Because this other thing has festered, and now some inane thing that comes up is going to be a problem. I think that marriages that get in trouble, they start fighting about stupid things, right? Because everything is annoying them now, because the big stuff was never came out, was never talked about honestly, and you weren't transparent about how you were feeling. And now you're nitpicking on all of these other things, right?
Absolutely.
So you have to be transparent. I think that you can't pretend, think that you're just going to throw something under the rug and, well, I'm just going to forget about this. If you're really hurt about something, you have to let that out. You have to be honest about how you're feeling.
I
I,
agree with you
yeah,
so
I think I'm
completely.
glad you brought that up, Carla, because that is another big piece. I mean, I think a lot of people do bury things because they don't want the conflict. But what they're not realizing is they're causing conflict in other areas now because they buried it. Do you know what I mean?
100%. In The Joy of Imperfect Love, I use the metaphor of a backpack because we want to keep what I call the backpack of our relationship clean. And if we're constantly putting pebbles of resentment, irritation into that backpack is going to get heavy. And it's going to, and there are times that, you'll pull things out from that backpack and hurl them at your partner. And that backpack gets heavy, and it's much like a trash container in the kitchen. If you just keep taking things that you don't want to discuss and put them in the trash and you don't empty the trash, then it's going to get stinky and smelly, and
Mm-hmm.
pests are going to come. So what we want to do, I agree with you. It's so important. And here's the biggest caveat in all of this. It's important to bring up your hurts, your feelings, your preferences, but we want to do it in a way that is not harmful to the self or to the partner, not accusatory, not, some people are so defensive that no matter what you say, they're going to take umbrage at it and have a fit. But for people who are generally have, healthy emotional intelligence, if you bring something up instead of saying, I hate you because you forgot our anniversary, that's not going to necessarily get you very far. But if you're able to bring it up in a way that says, I feel really sad and hurt that you forgot our anniversary. It would feel really good to me if we were able to celebrate it this coming Saturday. Would that work for you? And that takes a lot of mindfulness. It takes some self-control and self-regulation. But I call it, use an I message, I feel, state
Yes.
what the hurt is, and state the cure. What is the fix if there is one? Like, okay, I'm sorry you forgot to pick up the kids at soccer. Ah, so you say, or I'm sorry, I forgot to pick up the kids at soccer. I'll leave right now and I'll get them. I apologize. Next time I'll set a reminder in my phone so that I don't forget the kids again. And those are little issues in the whole scheme of things. But if we make it a practice to use those I messages of how you feel, what you need, what the fix is, then when we get to these bigger issues,
Right. You're going to use those same skills. Yeah, yeah, I'm right there with you. Um, if I think part of the communication and the being a good listener is what your partner is going to be defensive about, right? Because you've learned so much about them in this process of communicating, of sharing. So now a situation comes up that they're going to be defensive about. If you're armed with that knowledge, then you can go in, with that in the back of your mind, maybe a bit easier because the person's going to be on the defensive. So you're going to do some things about how you're going to bring up this subject that's going to keep things more calm, I guess I want to say. Or say your partner's late all the time. Like there's easy things you can do to fix that kind of stuff, right? I know he's going to be late, so I'm going to tell him to meet me 15 minutes earlier than I really want him
absolutely.
to meet me because he's going to be late and then I'm going to get upset. So, I mean, that's a silly, like little thing, right? But you get to know each other and then you try to, again, it's that moving forward, right? Together as a team, you try to learn for yourself how you're no longer going to get upset about that thing that's really not going to change in that person. Because there's some things we all have that we're just going to have, right? And so I think that's part of the whole thing too, right?
Absolutely.
Learning about your partner and learning how you're going to deal with something that is going to happen to make you feel good about it too. And to try to manipulate the situation so that it doesn't escalate, I guess. I mean, I don't know if manipulate's the right word to use there, Carla, but you know what I mean, I think, right?
I think it's really sage advice, especially when the items are little ones.
Yes.
A friend of mine once told me, and I never forgot it because I didn't even know it about myself. She said, "You're consistently 4 minutes late." And I said, "Hey." And she didn't say it in a mean way. She said, I thought, do I want to be 4 minutes late? nah, that's not really kind to other people, even though it's just 4 minutes. But so I took that feedback and have done my best to be a bit early or at least on time. But there are, and those are, you're right. A friend will make adjustments for 4 minutes, 10
Yeah.
minutes. They'll say, oh, that person, that's a thing. Where we don't want to make adjustments, and this is me as a psychologist, as a woman, saying, if somebody is being toxic, if
Yes,
they're
absolutely.
if they're aggressive, if they're hurtful, if they're sarcastic, if they're not listening, those are things in the relationship where we do want to say to a partner, wait a second, it's important for you to work on this
Right.
because
That's
I'm
right.
not able to speak my mind, or I'm not feeling safe, or I'm not feeling heard. And that's where the teamwork thing comes back into play big time.
Yeah.
People are imperfect, relationships are imperfect. Yet when we start seeing our own foibles, our weaknesses, our frailties, and we work on them, why not? It's a gift to the self, it's a gift to the relationship, it's a gift to the
Yes.
other, it's
The
a gift to
relationship
the
gets
world.
stronger,
Oh,
right?
yes. Oh, yes.
Going through all of this and coming out on the good end just makes it stronger and stronger and stronger as you move forward.
Absolutely. And makes both people proud of themselves because they're working on something that's far more lasting than business or money. They're working on their internal selves, their ability to communicate, their ability to love. So I'm a big fan of personal accountability. Yeah, there are parts of ourselves that little hiccupy things that are going to be quirky. That's going to be part of who we are. But on the big stuff, the toxic stuff, we do want to look, self-reflect, and put in the effort to change. Now, before we close, because I know we're really going into so much depth, you had said something earlier that I didn't want to let go of, and I wanted to dive in a little bit more deeply now. The piece about how important it is to not grow away from your partner, that when we have a relationship, especially our early young ones, the young relationships where we meet and we want to buy our first house and we want to have a kiddo and we want to have a pet, or we don't want a kiddo, and we have all of these life plans ahead of us. It's so easy, if we're mindful, to stay connected because we're joined by these mutual goals. But sometimes, as especially if people either meet later in life or the kids are gone and they realize, oh my God, we've grown apart because we don't have any mutual goals anymore, no mutual connection, no mutual shared, interests. That's the place where I think it's so important, and you had brought it up about, staying connected, that people will change. Let's hope we all change for the rest of our lives. That's why we're here, to change, evolve, become better human beings. And so we're going to change. It's, do we change with intention, or do we let life change us? And when
Oh,
we
that's a
change,
really good point.
I
Right.
so believe in it. If we're in a relationship and we're communicating, back to your piece about communicating, I love, it's such like a foundation of healthy relationships.
Yes.
But if we say, hey, hon, I know I'm no longer interested in working 9 to 5. I want to go and, do a startup, or hey, I no longer want to have kids, or I want to adopt a kid, or oh my God, I'm not liking my body anymore. It's sagging, or whatever is going on. When we bring that up and talk about it, or I have a new sport I'd like to undertake. I want to go skydiving. I want to take up yoga, whatever it is, right? We're communicating. We are bringing that partner even when we're tired, because so many times we come home, or if we're working from home, we finish the day, we see our partners like, hey, hi, how are you? Here, eat, okay, good, turn on the TV, go to sleep. There's no communing, there's no connecting, there is no way to could stay on each other's page. And the reason I wanted to focus on this is that if we have that communing, that ongoing connection of, this is who I'm evolving into. Sometimes someone we want to evolve into and we're not quite there yet. And we're talking to our partner about it. And they're talking to us about their successes during the day or the things that irritated them. And we're listening, not trying to fix it. Then that's creating this network, this web of energy and connection, that when those big pieces come, those big life changes, we're not taken by surprise because we're
Yeah.
already connected through this web of love. What do you think of that?
Well, with the change piece, I think that sort of goes hand in hand with two activities and likes and dislikes of the individual
Mhm.
people in on the team, right? So it's okay that you might like to go roller skating or rock climbing and your partner doesn't want to do that, right? But it's also not okay to completely ignore the fact that your partner really loves the rock climbing, for instance, and it's a big part of their life. You don't have to go and do it. Maybe they have a friend that does it with them. But then when they come home, you say, how was the rock climbing? Was this a better place than the last time you went? That's all it takes sometimes. You're
Mhm.
not necessarily having to move forward exactly the same together. That's why the changing that's happening, if you're at least on board, I think, with embracing what's happening to the person and trying to understand it, it's not going to pull you apart, right? I just have this really fun example, actually. So I was never a basketball fan. And my husband played basketball, throughout school. And then he coached at one point when our son was playing. Loves, loves, loves the Knicks. I was never into the Knicks. One birthday about, I don't know, 12 or 13 years ago, I decided to surprise him with Knicks tickets. So I was going to go to this game. I was going to force myself to go because I wanted to see what the big brouhaha was over it, right? We go every year. We have such a good time. I have nicknames for the players. I mean, through his joy about this sport that I knew nothing about, I get joy out of it now. I'm not saying that that's going to always happen, but sometimes when you just open your mind to a change, to doing something that maybe you didn't think you were going to like that your partner liked, that's kind of in that same, area of
Absolutely.
likes, dislikes that are different, things that you might have liked 2 decades ago, you no longer like, right? For numerous reasons. Maybe you're arthritic and you used to do gymnastics. I don't know. I mean, it could be numerous things, right? So you no longer do that, or you no longer dance because you have hip issues. So you found a new thing. And maybe your partner doesn't like that thing. But I think it's really about understanding what the change is and trying to embrace it in some way. Going back to you saying if it's a toxic thing, that's no good, right? We're just talking about normal changes. Maybe it's a midlife crisis kind of thing, right?
Mhm.
That happens, where the person's a little bit more depressed. They're not sure where they are at their life at this point. Digging in and getting into why that's happening to the person and trying to understand it, I guess, is
Absolutely.
important to move forward because you are going to have different likes and dislikes. That's okay. That's part of life. It's how you handle it and how you move forward with it and how you try to understand your partner and why they feel that way about whatever it is. If it's not necessarily an activity, right? It could be a state of mind or whatever it
It
is.
could be anything, and I
Yeah.
agree with you. I call it joining. When
Yeah.
you join with your partner, and you can join mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, you can say to someone, "Oh my God," like you, perfect example, and I've done that myself, where it's an activity that's outside my comfort zone, outside my natural interest. And I say, I'm going to lean into this because it gives my partner joy. I'm going to
Yes. And
lean
then that
into
makes you feel happy, right?
you get
Especially if your partner is giving back to you the same way with
well,
something, right?
especially, and that would be the teamwork piece when your
Yeah.
partner is able to lean in and say, "Well, hey, I'm not a big fan of going on daily walks or whatever it is, but because I love you, I'm going to lean in and do that with you." And so I think going back to the listener's question, what this does, all of these pieces we've talked about, when we work on communication, honesty, transparency, connection, joining, staying connected, these issues that come up in life, maybe somebody who's 30 finding out, they can't have kids, or, have somebody in their 20s finding they have a life-threatening illness, somebody in their 40s whose child, has an addiction, or there's a suicide, or
Oh, that's
anything that absolutely, if we have a partnership that has these foundations, these elements that are built in and nurtured, which takes work. And back to our fairy tale, we might often think, fairy tales, everyone had it so easy. Cinderella ended up in the castle, but that's not what the fairy tales are about at all. The fairy tales are about that heavy lifting that we often don't see in the romanticized versions of them. The heavy work that's done behind each character's, in their personality, that's done behind the scenes to make them get to a life that is more pleasant, more joyful, more fulfilled. So I think that when we have that as the foundation for our romantic relationships, we can truly partner with someone through thick and thin.
Yeah, you're stronger together, right?
Yes.
It's not that you have to have this person to make you internally happy, but it's about being stronger together, forging forward together through life's ups and downs and becoming stronger together when you come out the other side. I think
Absolutely.
every really long-term healthy relationship, Carla, is going to say something similar, that's how they sort of look at their marriage. Do you know what I mean?
I
That I'm
agree.
a better person and a stronger person. Doesn't mean that I'm not independent, but we help each other be better and we move forward together and become stronger for that as a
So
whole, as a team, right?
So true. And I do have to say, as we bring our time together to a close, that all of the pieces we've talked about today are applicable to friendships, the long-term friendships with our guy friends, with our female friends, that these are all, if you choose to be single or have good friends, while you're in a long-term relationship, all of these principles can be applied to creating healthy lifelong relationships of every type. So I firmly believe that the pieces that we talked about today will help new couples and longer term couples enjoy their relationships a lot more, as well as all of those single people out there. Myrna, thank you so much for taking your time to grace us today. Could you tell our listeners where they can find you?
Oh, certainly. So I would love it if your listeners would check out Sanctuary Magazine. That's sanctuary-magazine.com. So that's pretty easy. And, we have a special guest space in the magazine, which is nice, where there's interactives. I've actually had Carla be part of the Ask an Expert section on different occasions. And, so you can feel like you're a part of it. You can send in questions. We get photographs and inspirational stories from our listeners and readers too, with what we do. So please check out Sanctuary Magazine, and you can write to me. My information is there in the magazine. If you have somebody that you think might be a good fit for an interview, we always get feedback from listeners and look into things that they suggest for us. So thank you so much for having me on your wonderful show. I really appreciate it.
It's such a joy to have you. And for our listeners, please check out Sanctuary Magazine. It is so full of beautiful, inspiring images, messages, poetry, and so much is there. So, listeners, thank you as well for sharing your time with me today. And this is Imperfect Love.
Thanks so much for sharing your time with me today. Remember, you have the power to transform your life and love fearlessly, if imperfectly, and it's my privilege to help you along the way. You can find more life-changing content, including my books and other podcast episodes, at drcarlamanley.com. Feel free to submit your own confidential questions through my website. I'll do my very best to include your issue on a future episode. If you found this podcast helpful, please subscribe and leave a review. Until we connect again, this is Dr. Carla Marie Manley wishing you oceans of blessings and love. Please note, this podcast is psychoeducational in nature and is not intended to replace formal mental health support. Please contact your healthcare provider or emergency hotline if you need psychiatric care. And as always, please take good care of your amazing, wonderful self.